Welcome to PWS United, a podcast for the Prader-Willi syndrome community, brought to you by PWSA USA. This podcast gives the latest news in research, advocacy, and family support by bringing together staff, volunteers, PWS treatment specialists, biotech and pharmaceutical representatives, caregivers, family members, and individuals with PWS. Our goal is to share education, awareness, and resources with those living with PWS and their supporters. Join us in our mission to enhance the quality of life and empower those affected by Prader-Willi syndrome.
Hey everyone, it's Annie here. I'm just here to give you a few updates before we get into this episode with Maria Picone and Chris DeFelice from Trend. First, I just want to acknowledge the horrific fires happening at the moment in LA and remind our community that we are here to provide service where we can. If you are a PWS family affected by the LA fires, please contact us if you need help connecting with resources or would like to speak with someone on our family support team. So email info@pwsausa.org if you have questions or need help, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. I'm also including a link in our show notes to our emergency preparedness checklist designed with PWS families in mind, and it is a great tool for any family who would like to be more prepared for the seemingly increasing natural and human-made disasters. I know how devastating fires can be. I live in California, and I have had to evacuate my home twice, once when I really thought that I was leaving it for the last time. It is a challenging, grief-filled, shocking experience to go through. Freya and I were actually in LA last Tuesday when the fire started. Thankfully, I didn't see it until we were driving to the airport, but I just keep thinking about all the people we met while we were down there. You know, the servers and the drivers and the doctors and the nurses, and my heart goes out to all of them, and I just hope that everyone is getting through safely. So Freya and I were there for the pitolisant trial, which in some random synchronicity relates to today's episode because the pitolisant trial is an option in our community because of the work that Maria and Chris have done with Trend. So if you're interested in learning more about what they're doing to help PWS research and connect PWS families, you'll want to stay and listen. This was originally recorded as a webinar a few months ago, but we wanted to make sure that all of our community had a chance to learn about PWS Connect on Trend, because what they're doing is so incredibly valuable to our community. But I'm going to let them get into that in the interview, because they explain it way better. But I also wanted to let you guys know that we have started a new project on PWS Connect, and we're calling it the Journeys Project. So first off, I'm going to get clear on the names. So Discord is the app. So before you do anything else, maybe go into your phone or your desktop and download the Discord app, because you'll need that to do any of this. Trend is the company gathering the information, and PWS Connect is the name of the channel on Discord that is for parents of individuals with PWS. So hopefully that clears up any confusion, if there is any. Now I'll leave the explanation of why we hope you join PWS Connect to Maria and Chris, but I'll tell you what the Journeys Project is. So every month we're choosing a different theme and providing prompts in the general chat. So prompts will come out the first and third Mondays of the month. January's theme is birth story or backstory. We've already put out our first prompt, which was what was your PWS birth experience, but that will remain open to any and all responses, even if 3 months down the road you want to go back and tell your birth story. It'll be there. So you can find that prompt in the general chat. We'll be covering other topics like therapies, growth hormone diagnosis, etc. And sharing our stories is a fantastic way to connect, to share ideas, to learn from each other, and to build on the growing knowledge of PWS and the many ways it affects families. So we hope that you enjoy this episode of PWS United and take some time to join PWS Connect on Discord. And we are looking forward to seeing you there. So now, here is Stacy talking with Maria and Chris about Trend. Stay safe out there.
Everyone. Today we are excited to introduce Maria Picone and Chris DeFelice from Trend Community. Trend is a community-powered data analytics company that transforms conversations from social media into valuable insights to close gaps in the medical and scientific understanding of rare conditions like PWS. Today, Maria and Chris will take us through their story, the research, and how we're working together, PWSA and Trend community, to make real change for the PWS community. So Chris and Maria, thank you guys so much for being here.
Yeah.
To start, Maria, could you just kind of tell us a little bit about how you and Chris started Trend community?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, thanks for having us. And for those of you who don't know us, we have a 12-year-old daughter who has Prader-Willi syndrome. Her name is Taya. Oh my gosh, she just turned 12. So it feels like a lifetime ago. When Taya was born, like many of you, we had sort of a crazy birth experience. We were fortunate. She was diagnosed at 10 days with Prader-Willi syndrome. And we, set out immediately to try to figure out what this meant for us, what this meant for her future. And just to rewind a little bit, Chris and I, prior to that, had been working in digital health. So we were both rowers, actually, training for the national team, and coincidentally had both taught ourselves, to program so that we could have a career while we were training for the national team. I had been working in pharma also prior to that. So we had, this experience. And when we retired from rowing, we started a digital health analytics company. So we were building clinical trial software for a research organization here in Philadelphia. We did some work for pharmaceutical companies and hospital systems. And so when Taya was born, the first thing that we thought to do was to go to the medical literature and read everything we could to figure out, what to expect and what this meant. And then fast forward about 3 months later, I joined Facebook and found a community. I joined the Facebook group called Living Well with Prader-Willi syndrome. And for me, I was immediately struck by what seemed to be a big gap between what we'd read about PWS in literature and what appeared to be possible for a kid born today with this condition. And so I'll bounce it over to Chris a little bit to tell you a little more about what we've been doing prior to having Taya, because we had some unique skills that helped us to try to wrap our heads around what was going on and to dig into the insights that were being shared by our community.
Can you explain to the audience what digital health means when you said that you were in digital health?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Just to start, I just, thanks everybody for having us on and the day. So I know we're all busy and obviously we all here are dealing with Prader-Willi. So we have a lot on our plate. So I do appreciate that. Yeah. Digital health. I mean, basically we're creating technology applications that help us capture things around digital health. So like, I know a lot of you are familiar with registries. That could be digital health, right? In that regards. Some other applications are like, say, pharmaceutical applications where they're trying to record adverse events, say. So you take a medication and you have some type of adverse reaction to that medication. Drug information intake systems. So a lot of these tools that are being applied, say, in your EMRs, your medical record applications, you see those things that you're in your appointment that maybe many of you see Dr. Miller or your endocrinologist and they're punching notes in those applications. That would be digital health. And there's many different forms of those. How we kind of got where we are today, as Maria said, we started off when we retired from our careers in rowing. We started like our own lifestyle company, and we were creating those types of applications for institutions here in Philadelphia. And that was kind of our first foray, our introduction into like entrepreneurship. Like I said, this is more of a lifestyle company, so we were kind of working to kind of live a lifestyle that we wanted to live. And that from our rowing, we actually made other contacts and our network, and a coach in rowing actually reached out to us and knew our programming and software background and had an idea for an application that required analytics. And this is 2010, 2011. So this was like, early forms of AI. So everyone hears artificial intelligence as buzzwords today. This is technology that's been around for a long time. Obviously, it's a bit more advanced, but people have been doing machine learning and varying types of artificial intelligence for quite some time. So this is not necessarily a novel concept, but it's been exploding just for other reasons, which I won't go into tonight. But this analytics company, we started kind of messing around with email, a lot of Gmail type Gmail applications or plugins for Gmail to kind of help people understand topics that they're talking about, analytics. And we did that for a few years. But during that startup phase that we had here, we had Taya in 2012, so there was an overlap there. Shortly after we had Taya, we parted ways from that startup, but we gained a tremendous amount of knowledge in terms of into analytics, namely natural language processing. Natural language processing is basically something that allows us to create applications that allow us to perform tasks that are productive for us through natural language. So things like your Alexa or your Siri. Hopefully, I didn't make anyone's device.
Not at my house.
Yeah, those are forms of natural language processing, and that's a subfield of artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is a huge spectrum of different types of techniques. I always make the joke that when somebody says like artificial intelligence, there's like, what exactly are you doing in there? It's like when you ask somebody what they do for a living, they say they're a consultant. You're like, okay, what are you consulting? So that was our first introduction to it. So trying to shorten this up and brief it up a bit. So we started going into trying to just figure out our own problems for our daughter and stuff like that.
So when we joined the community, just to back up a little bit, we had been told, I'm sure like many of you, that hyperphagia would never be our problem because there were so many promising drugs in clinical trial. We'll like put that on the table and move it over to the side because we all know that it's still our problem, but that's what we were told and that's what we believed. And after joining this online community, I realized that PWS was so much more complicated than we'd been led to believe. And some of the kids were doing things that we were told would never be possible. And so Chris and I wanted to use these tools that we had from this previous entrepreneurial endeavor to try to pull out the conversations from the social media group, to try to analyze all the symptoms people were talking about, and then all of the things that they were doing to treat PWS, and then use that to figure out what were people doing that were having the best possible health outcomes for their kids. That was in the beginning all we wanted to do. We didn't have a company around it. We just knew that we had these skills, and at the time, it was really easy to hook into Facebook, pull out the conversations, and analyze them. We'll talk about privacy later, but a lot has happened since then, and of course, privacy is a big concern. But back then, pretty much anyone could do what we did if they had the technical skills. And so we used this to our advantage to help us understand, how to best manage PWS for Taya.
Well, we actually, even though other companies were taking advantage of the loose constraints around Facebook, we were actually still being very considerate of the data we were analyzing and working with the group, so just so we're clear, it's always been something that's been first and foremost on our minds.
Yeah, we've done, like Chris, we did have a technology company before this, and we'll talk about it more later, but we've always taken a privacy first approach, which means that at the foundation of everything we do, we're always thinking about the privacy of the people whose data we're analyzing.
I think it's fascinating. I think I met you when you first started. Taya was a baby at one of the conferences, and to see how far the company's come and the things that you guys are doing now is just really cool to me. I didn't mean to cut you off, Maria.
No. I think the only other thing is, we were doing this work really for our own personal reasons. And then in 2016, the FDA passed the 21st Century Cures Act, which obligates pharmaceutical companies to incorporate the patient voice into all phases of drug development. And so at that point, we knew we had a really unique way to capture the opinions, perspectives, and experiences of many people living with rare and chronic conditions. And that's why in 2017, we decided to launch Trend.
So I understand that some of Trend's insights have helped lead us to important connections. So PWS and narcolepsy. Can you tell us more about this research and how Trend helped you establish that link from a social listening perspective? How did you do it?
So I think, first of all, we all in this group know that as parents, as patients, we have hunches all the time, and we sort of, we're on the front lines, and we see things, and it's hard to know, is it just something that my kid with PWS is experiencing, or is it something that other people in the community are also experiencing? And in the early days, once we started using this approach, Laura Pullen, who many of you might know, she's an amazing mom and an incredible immunologist. Her son was experiencing these very severe sleep attacks, and he was being rushed to the ER every day. It was very profound and sudden. And she started to try to understand what was happening to him. And at the same time, we started to explore the conversations from the social media groups. And interestingly, when we analyzed the social media groups at the time, one of the things that bubbled up really high in the conversations was sleep issues. So we all know that hyperphagia and obesity are the top things. And so it's interesting, right, that something like sleep would come up so high. And that's really to how we approach any project is it's listening first. So don't presume to know. We just, as met with some adults with PWS, and one of the things that they said is that they're not all the same, and that they don't want to be treated like they're all the same. And so that's sort of what we believe at Trend, is that you don't ever want to presume to know what defines a community. And so we listen. And when sleep bubbled up really high in the conversations, it just meant like there's something there that we could explore. And since our community was so focused on hyperphagia and obesity, we thought that was something that maybe we could tackle, and that maybe there would be a clue in there about how to improve Taya's quality of life. And so we actually ended up partnering with Dr. Ivana and Dr. Glaze at Texas Children's Hospital. Today, we call this approach a real-world evidence accelerator. Back then, we didn't have a name for it. I don't even think we had a company yet. I think it was 2016. And we went to them with this conversation data, and we asked them to help us understand, like, what's happening here. And as we started to tease things out, and, Laura was on this journey with her son, we started to connect the dots and realize that many of our kids are experiencing symptoms of narcolepsy and cataplexy. Cataplexy is a sudden loss of muscle tone. And in the conversations, a lot of parents thought their kids were faking sleep, right? And so we started to look for other clues. It was like micro sleeps while eating, head bobbing, sudden loss of balance, lots of things that altogether might indicate that the kids were experiencing narcolepsy. So we did a lot of other things, like, surveys off the back of that, and, other methods to then really validate that what was happening within our community. But those early insights from this approach really that's what sparked this whole research around narcolepsy and PWS.
So prior to that, going back to when you said you guys did the deep dive into the published articles and the research that was out there when Taya was born, was sleep noted in any of those things?
No, not that I recall.
I think sleep
Like,
is in the literature, but not.
things that we that was popping up for us. Remember, this is us doing our own lip review, so I don't want to speak for everybody else that might have found something else. The things that were coming up were the hyperphagia, right? Those are the big that was the big symptom, and that was also the big one that our neonatologists shared with us when we got the diagnosis. So yeah, those are the type of things that were popping up for us, and and those are the things where that, and just kind of like the body shape, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like the particular body shapes that were coming up. So, those are the things that we were kind of worrying about, and family asking, we'd be talking about, like, this insatiable appetite and the typical things. I think we saw a couple of talk shows where Dr. Miller's on, and they have a child that's, really seeking food and stuff, So those are the things that were popping up a lot. Like I said, like it started coming up on our radar where I said Lara started having this thought process of like, I think there might be a sleep component. And like I said, it rung a bell with us because we were struggling with Taya while she was eating, and she would fall asleep and have a lot of head bobbing while she was eating during her meals and stuff. And we thought it was bizarre that we were seeing that. Although we didn't know it was our first child, so we were first time parents. But by our third child, we're like, whatever, fall, you're not walking yet by 12 months. It's all right. You'll get there, Yeah, that was a lot of the things that were going on. And just like, you're looking for the things that you only know about. Right. So I think the approach here with this technology, like where technology is going today, is that, yeah, you can do this deductive top-down approach, which is still great, right? Like, we want to look for certain signals in there, but it's tricky with data. That's why they call it data science, because you can paint a picture with what you want to paint it with data. And that's the tricky part with it. And I think this inductive approach, where you're going from the bottom up and just listening, right? The social listening aspect, and being able to just hear what's coming up to the conversations, but being able to pinpoint, the actual clinical like discussions that we are having that might not on the surface appear to be clinical, but they are, right? We're talking about our daily burdens, our symptoms, and some of the techniques that we're using to manage those is data. It's not just anecdotal, right? This is near real time information that we're sharing, and technology now lets us transform that into like real evidence, right? Stuff that we can take from unstructured and create structured data out of it.
So fast forward, just what Chris is saying, the technology we're building today, our goal is to understand how patients and caregivers talk about their experiences in their own words. So we had the idea for Trend because back then, our community, we weren't talking about narcolepsy and cataplexy. We were talking about faking sleep, head bobbing. And so our analytics, what we're focused on is mapping those things, the words that people use to describe their symptoms, to medical terms. And then bringing that lexicon, is what it's called, that language, to doctors so that doctors can ask better questions, or PWSA USA can ask better questions. You can't answer a question, does your kid have narcolepsy, if you don't know what narcolepsy is, right? And so that is important. And equally important is the giving it back, right? So once we understand that all of these signs and symptoms actually have a name, giving that back to the community so that we have the language that we need to have a better discussion with our doctors. And as we started to do this, one of the important things about what we do at Trend is that we publish. And so if it's not in the medical literature, then it's not diagnosed, it's not research, you can't approve drugs for it. And I know that our community is becoming very savvy in terms of drug development, but without data, you can't do drug development. And back then, no one had ever done a clinical trial for anything other than hyperphagia. And so how could we possibly do a clinical trial on a symptom for which we had no data, right? So we were making a lot of noise about this finding. And Laura is also a medical writer. So we were in the New York Times, we were publishing, doing all these things. And you all know Harmony Biosciences by now, I'm sure. They have a drug, pitolisant, and they were bringing it to market for narcolepsy. And they actually contacted us before they even made a public announcement to talk about possibly doing a study in Prader-Willi syndrome. And so we've been working with Harmony since the very beginning on that clinical trial. And in fact, went to the FDA with all of the data that we had from social media to show that there was actually an unmet need, and that it wasn't one kid having these sleep attacks. There were many, many people on social media talking about the same experience. And it's for that that Harmony was able to even do a clinical trial around excessive daytime sleepiness in Prader-Willi syndrome.
Well, you guys are brilliant, and so is Laura. And I think, when I first got involved in the PWS community 20 years ago, in my trainings, I was told, people with PWS are just sleepy. That's what happens. It's part of being PWS. They fall asleep all the time. Maybe they get up really early, or they'll fall asleep the second you get in the car, or they'll fall asleep at school. But it was just like this accepted symptom as part of PWS rather than pulling it out and really looking at it. So I just think it's fascinating, and you guys are so brilliant. Chris, from a technology perspective, because my understanding is that you're kind of the tech guy here, how did you use the technology to get this data to then bring it to the FDA?
Yeah, well, it goes back to, right, like, so, I mean, social media data, there's like this term of like structured and unstructured data and technology terms, right? And what that basically means, structured data is like when you look at a survey, right? Those are structured questions and you have structured responses that you're looking at, right? Some type of like 5-point Likert scale from, extremely severe to, not severe or something, right? And those are structured responses. Something like social media we would call unstructured, right? Because it's just text, right? And you can be talking about like, hey, great webinar. And then, we discuss like, and yeah, these were really, it was great that we were able to talk about some of the sleep issues that are affecting our community, right? So there's some kind of just regular amicable responses there, but then also responses related to like, these are the things that, we're focusing on in terms of burden. The main thing is what Mira talked about, right? Like there's all these different lexical or language variations in how we might describe a cataplectic event that we're experiencing with our child that doesn't say cataplexy, right? Because who talks? No, I mean, it took me months until she was able to finally get through my head what was happening cataplexy wise, right? But industry or FDA understands cataplexy and they understand narcolepsy because those are terms or what we'll call concepts that are represented in ontologies or medical vocabularies that they use. So how do you understand those different variations, right, that map to narcolepsy or they map to cataplexy, right? Or hyperphagia, right? We don't really necessarily, there's so many different ways we might talk about hyperphagia, right? Food seeking, or more novel one, as we're finding, is hiding food in the cheek. So you have to map that back to something where then you can, show something more aggregated in terms of representing like the magnitude or the frequency that this burden represents in the community to the FDA, or say someone like a Harmony Biosciences, right? Because that's how they're going to interpret the data and that's how they're going to make their informed decision off of it, right? So you got to take all these different variations and kind of coalesce that into a more industry accepted concept where they're going to be able to understand that a bit better. And that's, in essence, hopefully I explained that as simple as I could, kind of how the technology works, right? So there's a whole bunch of other things that are happening in terms of statisticals and probabilities and, a lot of compute power that goes into it. But ultimately what we're trying to understand is like, how do we map these different variations map to this concept? Is this concept actually, are they talking about it in a burden-like effect? Because sometimes we might just talk about Prader-Willi syndrome and just be like, hey, are you going to the Prader-Willi event that PWSA is hosting, right? And that doesn't necessarily, we mentioned Prader-Willi, but mentioning Prader-Willi doesn't really map to a burden or a management or, at a high level, right? So we want to differentiate between them. So that's ultimately how we do it and like how we distill this information to the many stakeholders. And the many stakeholders are not just FDA or industry, but it's also community.
So you're the genius behind the scenes.
Actually, no, the real geniuses are actually like all my engineers and data scientists, but they make us look smart. But they always say, right, because you want to surround yourself with smart people, right?
100%.
So
All right. So
very
now
fortunate to have a good team.
let's shift to our exciting partnership. So Trend and PWSA USA have partnered on an online community called PWS Connect, and it's hosted on the Discord platform. Maria, can you tell us how and why we went to Discord?
Yeah. So I see some questions coming in through the chat, and we'll start to talk about, ethics and privacy a little bit more. So I mentioned previously that we've always taken a privacy first approach. One of the things that's really foundational to what we do is we only analyze data that we can access through what's called a public, like an API. So which is an
Application programming interface.
Application programming interface, which means that the
vendor or platform themselves have provided mechanisms for third-party companies or resources to request data.
So our developers can hook into that data source and ethically like pull out the data.
It's a way for the platform to verify who's requesting data. So you'll hear in industry a lot of terms like web scraping, and web scraping a lot of times you might have heard that a lot recently with like these LLMs like
Large
ChatGPT
language
coming
model.
out. Yeah, I was going to get there.
Sorry.
Yeah. Just taking data and people saying you're violating our copyright infringements, right? So they're creating programs that are basically going on people's sites that are automated to pull that information out. APIs are a way for, Discord or Facebook or Reddit to verify who's actually requesting data. So, I always say we're in the process that we request data, and that allows them to also vet our application to make sure we abide by their terms of service and their privacy policies, right? So they want to know why we're collecting this data, what data we're collecting, and how do we plan on using that data, so they could be like, okay, you are in alignment with our policies as a company.
So all of that to say, all the work that we've done previously with Prader-Willi syndrome and narcolepsy was done through Facebook. And earlier this year, Facebook shut down their API. So no third-party vendors now can access Facebook's conversation data. Previously, we were able to, with permission from the administrators of the group, access the anonymized conversation. So everything's anonymous. We never pulled personally identifiable information. But to fast forward to answer your question, all of the great work that we've been doing has been on Facebook. And then now we can no longer get that data. And given the example of narcolepsy and Prader-Willi syndrome, we believe that there's so much potential in just listening to what people are saying in these online communities that are set up to provide support and, peer-to-peer connection, that, we needed to find another way. And on top of that, we know that if we can, the thing with Facebook is that because it was so anonymized, we could never say Stacy Ward, even if you're anonymous, this user said this and this user said that, and this user said this. And you can imagine how powerful that would be, because we'd want to know if someone's experiencing narcolepsy or hyperphagia, what other things are happening, and what does the progression look like over time. We've never been able to do that in Facebook. We're actually able to do that in Reddit because there's a publicly available API, and their terms of service allow us to analyze the conversations as part of, what you sign up for. So we've decided with PWS USA to take this to a whole other level and create a space where people can consent to join the community. And that means that everybody who joins the group, they understand that we're doing research, that there's a research component. We're still concerned about privacy. Everything is anonymized. We're never sharing personally identifiable information. Everything is aggregated, which means we want to know how many people are talking about narcolepsy. What's the lexicon? What are all the different ways we express narcolepsy or hyperphagia or whatever it might be in the future? And so Discord we chose for many reasons, but part of it is our ability to engage with Discord. So in addition to actually like getting the data out and analyzing it, we can actually push our analytics in. So for the very first time, our communities can also benefit from the data analytics that we've been doing from within the community.
Yeah, I just want to add a couple of things of why we decided on Discord as well. One, it provides that API, which is crucial. It provides a web application for people who like to access things on their laptop or desktop. It provides a native mobile application for people that don't have a laptop or a desktop and they like to use their phone. The ability to DM in there. The other piece, I think, two other pieces that I think are crucial for this decision is that they don't do the cross-site monitoring like Facebook does. I'm not trying to like talk bad about Facebook or anything, but I know more often than not, people are probably like, I was just looking at this product and all of a sudden it's popped up in my Facebook feed. Right. And that's what I mean by cross-site. So they're able to like track things where you're not actually on Facebook, but then it all of a sudden pops up in Facebook. That's not in like Discords, like that's not their business that they're in for. The other piece too is like we could create our own place and have people go there. We thought a neutral area would be nice, right? So say trend doesn't exist one day. As Jeff Bezos says, like Amazon will go bankrupt one day, right? It's just the nature of every business, right? I hope that's not the case with trend. But what if we're not around, right? There is a spot here, and our personal platform, if we did this in some, place that we created and had, then that all goes down with it. And I think we've seen over the last year, there's been like, a few registry platforms that have gone down. And now everybody was frantically trying to figure out, some people lost their data and other people are frantically trying to figure out where to put their or move their data. And they're like, well, I can have somewhere to put it, but how do I move it? Right. So we didn't want it somewhere where like, the community would be able to live on, say, if trend wasn't here. So those are some of the big components there. So we decided like on a neutral area, and we thought Discord was at least a good first step in that area, with the other aspects that it provides for all of us.
I'll share from my own personal experience. I hear from my children all the time that Facebook is for old people, and they've been on Discord long before I knew Discord existed. And, they used it primarily for gaming and that sort of thing. But I do think what I'm seeing anecdotally is it is becoming a larger platform that people are going to instead. So I think that's interesting. The other thing I really like about this approach is for many people in our community, they can't participate in clinical trials for one reason or another. And this is a way for them to still participate in research. And that's so important. So I thank you again.
Can I say one thing, Stacy? So when you join Discord, even if it doesn't feel like the right place for you right now to go every day and get your support, I know you're already maybe on Facebook and it's easy because you do other things on Facebook. We have a concept of a journey. And so when you come in, there's a specific place where you can read others' journeys and you can post your journey. And that could be as much or as little as you want to share right now, and you can add to it over time. But even if we only had everybody come in and share their journey, and from time to time come back and give a little more about their journey, again, like understanding how powerful the registry is and how difficult it is to collect data. If only for now people use Discord in that way, just to pop in every now and then, see what's going on, and say something about your journey. Oh my gosh, like there's so much we could do with just that.
Well, and not only so much you could do, those journeys that people have posted so far are so inspiring. When I look at them from an outside perspective, as not being a parent, I cry. Sometimes I laugh. Chris, you're very funny in the things that you post. But it's inspiring, and I would think that in some ways it's also really inspiring for other families. But also, it's again that sense of belonging. Like I'm not alone in this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I always think for like when people are newly diagnosed, I always reflect back on when we got our diagnosis, right? It's such like this giant, like, you feel suffocate, you feel like you're suffocating, right? You have this giant weight on you, and seeing some of these other experiences and how people kind of were into it and worked through it, helps alleviate some of that pressure that you're feeling on your chest, some of that suffocation. So, it is impactful and powerful. And, hopefully when we're in some of those journeys, if at least you walk away from this, like, you sharing just a little bit, right, is going to have a profound impact. Somebody new that inevitably is being diagnosed right now and is about to be introduced into this world of ours. So.
Yeah. So what's on the horizon for Trend? The research, how are you going to use it to impact the PWS community moving forward?
So when we first realized we had an idea for a company, a business, we thought, wow, what if we could create a platform like Facebook that could turn our conversations into data? Because Facebook's a great place to share, but not a great place to consume data, right? Or information, not data. Like if I want to understand like all the different diets people have tried and the outcome, it's really hard to do. And so what ends up happening is people ask the same questions over and over. Newly diagnosed people come in. So to take that newly diagnosed, idea to another level, imagine if you buy into this idea and you come in and you participate, eventually we'll be able to aggregate all of these insights so that people can come in and read about all of the different things, diets, hyperphagia, narcolepsy. And we think that we'll be able to elevate the conversation. We're obviously still really, committed to the sleep discussion and better understanding sleep in Prader-Willi syndrome. We're newly engaged in hyperphagia. We've learned that it's way more complicated and not as well understood as we thought. So we're really committed to understanding that. And we think this could be a powerful tool to help us. And then beyond that, it's really just about listening. We don't know. We don't know. And what the next thing will sort of uncover itself as we engage the platform.
Chris, can you tell us about ChristyBot and how this technology will enhance the community's experience? In full disclosure, I thought ChristyBot was named after Christy. So if you could tell us that story as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So we refer like we named our analytics engine, right? So basically the natural language processing engine that gives us the insights, Christy. Actually, it was our employees or staff that came up with the name. An older employee that we had back in the day, she actually spearheaded this because she was doing a lot of research in the Tay-Sachs community. So we were doing a lot of work in the Tay-Sachs community at the time. And there was a daughter in there that I guess defied a lot of the odds. So Tay-Sachs, unfortunate children, it's a young mortality rate. So they pass away at a very young age. She kind of surpassed those odds and passed away at 9, but that was much longer that was expected in a typical Tay-Sachs diagnosed child. So she was inspired by that journey and proposed us naming the engine Christy. So we named it Christy. As you see, a lot of these systems will give names to it to kind of like humanize the technology so people feel a little more comfortable using it. So it's not so invasive. They don't feel scared by it, because it's scary sometimes if you don't really understand what's happening, which is fair. So Christy Bot, we just refer to as Christy. So to Maria's point, right? Like Discord's also nice, which we couldn't, even when we were in Facebook, we still couldn't do this. We can inject and fuse technology through what they call like plugins or bots in Discord. So like a bot is synonymous with like, say, a plugin that you might experience on another site. But that's essentially allowing us to inject technology, and we can through that inject data into that. So we created this bot called Christy in the space, to Maria's point. So as we talk and we share our experiences and we inevitably help each other, troubleshoot what we're going through, right? We're analyzing that data and aggregating it. So now you can ask Christy questions like, hey, how much are we talking about sleep? How much am I talking about sleep? I can't ask Christy how much Stacy's talking about sleep. She won't answer that, but she'll answer aggregated group data or personal data about, what I've been discussing. So to Maria's point, right? We ask a lot of the same questions, right? And that's just how it's going to be. And that's completely normal, right? Somebody newly got diagnosed, they're going to ask, I research a lot of hyperphagia. Can somebody tell you is there a drug on the market for hyperphagia, right? So you can ask Christy these questions, or our hope is over time, right? She's very much in what we call like an alpha stage. So as you go through product development, these different versions. She's very much in her infancy in terms of this approach. But what you see, like kind of how you talk to ChatGPT, if people are familiar with ChatGPT, how you just ask a natural language question in your language, and ChatGPT will respond back with a natural language response that you're accustomed to. That's how you interact with Christy. So if I wanted to mention you, Stacy, in the Discord, hey, Stacy, how are you? You can just Christy ask your question. Like I said, she's still very much in infancy, so it's an active development that we're on. But the more people that come in here, the more people that talk use of space also will help inform the product development of Kristen, especially through feedback and just seeing some of the prompts that we're asking her, and seeing what she's responding with and what she's not capable of responding with, right? Because we might not have that in there yet, but that'll be informative because people are asking a lot of the same type of questions that we can't handle. Then, okay, maybe we need to start thinking about having her handle those questions.
That's great. If you guys are comfortable and still have enough time, I'd love to open it up for questions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you don't mind, little interruption.
We might have a child come in here.
I've been there.
We'll mute if we have to scream.
It's fine. So the first question was, how does Trent decide which findings are worth sharing with the doctors and the researchers? And is there a specific aha moment when you know something is helpful?
So I talked about this real world evidence accelerator approach. So, in full disclosure, I think it's important to understand our business model. We work mostly with pharmaceutical companies as our clients. And so they subscribe to our insights, which again are very high level. Are people talking about narcolepsy? Are people talking about pain? And then what are they saying about narcolepsy and pain? So companies like Soleno and Harmony Biosciences and Cadia are all working with us. As part of that subscription, we reinvest a portion always back into the things that are important to the community. So we call them, these are initiatives. We're always running community driven initiatives. And so as we're looking at the insights, almost everything we do, not, it in some way goes back to the community. So as we're learning new things, we're publishing reports. We share the quarterly insights reports with you all. We're publishing things. And whenever something, it's sort of like a multi-stakeholder approach. PWSA USA might identify something in the data that would be important to you, or one of our industry partners might identify something. It's really, there's no magic formula to identifying something that is important to kind of drive forward, but somehow it always sort of happens, right? It may be mental health. When we were working with the gout community, mental health kind of bubbled up as something that people were talking about a lot. And a lot of people said, this is important. When the sleep thing came up, it was kind of obvious because people were talking about it a lot. And then through this approach, we bring it to researchers, we bring it to clinicians, we bring it to industry partners.
Just to add that, so we get on the next thing too. I think the big piece here is that people think like this technology is replacing. It requires humans. It requires humans to kind of develop it, right? But it also requires humans to kind of gather around and look at the insights and understand like, okay, what are we looking at? And I think to kind of be like, okay, what's an aha moment? A lot of times where we share an analysis, say we share an analysis in this meeting here, in this forum that we're having, we'll be like, yeah, this makes sense. We talk about this a lot. This. Something else could be like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And that sometimes could lead into that aha moment, right? What is the thing that we expected all this, right? And a lot of times we'll get that, right? Some people who are kind of maybe on the fence about this approach, right? And they're kind of like, maybe it might be a naysayer because they just don't understand it, right? And that's fair, right? They're going to be like, yeah, we already know all this. And that's great. I love hearing that because that means our technology is working. You just validated that what we analyze, and I had no idea what this disease or this condition. But a lot of times, aha moment starts out with, you don't realize it, like to Maria's point, but I wasn't expecting to see this symptom pop up on this chart with the other common hallmark symptoms. So that's kind of like the leading instance sometimes. So
There is a question asking if you guys use any information from the PATH study.
Oh, we haven't. Yeah, but we do in many cases with other communities. We've combined data from social listening with other research initiatives, registries, whatever it might be. And the insights from Trend can either inform those things, like suggest that we should add some questions to the PATH study, for example, or if there's a finding in that as part of that initiative, often you can use the social data to kind of validate what you're seeing. So, I'm trying to think of an example, but if you're doing a research project and you have a small number of participants, and you find something interesting, you can then go back to the social data from the community to see if people were also talking about that thing online. And it's just a way to kind of bolster the research that's happening. So we haven't, but it's certainly something that we could do.
Yeah, especially now that the PATH study is done and that they're going to be doing some publications of that.
Absolutely.
Helpful. Just one other question that came up though was, what was the upside of the opportunities in the near term? And you guys did talk about this a little bit already, but is there any last things that you would want to share around that?
Upside in the near term in terms of participating in the group? Do you think, is that the question?
So
So, the downside, if I can start with the downside to a new thing, is that it takes time to generate data. And that's why we need people to join and at least share their journeys. However, as we have people joining the group, it gives us an opportunity to tap into that group for certain things. So recently, for example, we've been doing some work in hyperphagia. We've been able to analyze the old data that we've, collected together through Facebook, and some of the information from the Discord group shared in the journeys. But then because the Discord group is so young, we fielded a survey, right? And we asked people to participate in a survey. That survey already has over 100 responses. And so in the near term, we can, we can come to the community with specific questions to start to fill in those gaps in the literature if there is a need.
that's great. If there's any other questions, let me just take a look here.
I
So
see a question about getting involved in advocacy. Um,
yeah,
I'll take that. So, you know, both are really important. Having the data to amplify all of the voices in our community, but then to hear individual personal stories are also really important. This community knows a lot of people are going to the FDA telling their stories. It's really important to hear from individuals, and we always love to incorporate individual stories in the things that we do at Trend. So definitely, if you're interested in getting involved in advocacy, please reach out. We've done some cool things, like we did a project at a rheumatology conference last year at an art museum. We held a social event with one of our pharmaceutical partners at an art museum, and we had patients we had our easel set up where they had shared their stories. And people would kind of go around the art museum and listen to the different stories that people had to share. If you're interested in doing advocacy, we think the more voices, the better. And so even if you're not a pro at doing advocacy, we'd love to hear from you and work with you.
I want to give you kind of a personal thank you for the time that you spent talking with individuals with PWS. So, so much of the work that we all do is through parents and caregivers. And I, as you know, feel very passionate about also capturing the voice of those living with PWS. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for doing that. And also, recognizing that you learned more and different things.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's just.
I mean, I will say, I guess talking about future too, can't wait to hear more from them. I think it can be intimidating to think about the future, right? But the people that we've been meeting on recently, adults living with PWS, they have so much to teach us, and they are so wise. And so, yeah, I'm also grateful to have that opportunity. And I think that their voices definitely need to be heard and incorporated more into the things that we do.
Thank you for that. Are there any last questions?
Well, I'd just like to add, Stacy, just for people that do join the space, if you've never used Discord, I mean, there is a learning curve, like any new application. If you get into the space and you're not sure, just ask a question. I'm in there fairly frequently making fun of Maria. You know, you can mention me, you can friend me and DM me, and I'll be happy to answer those questions. And so if you come in, you're not sure what to do or having a hard time, traversing and navigating the site, that's to be expected. Any new technology is hard, like to embrace if you're new to Discord. But I think like once you get in there, you'll see like it fairly becomes intuitive over time. You just got to use it a couple of times. But please don't ask those questions because we can't answer them if you don't ask them. So.
I would say that the biggest learning curve I have, and I'm not even sure that it was about learning, but it was that when I first logged in, it's not flashy and bright the way other social media is. And at first I was like, am I in the right place? What I have found is it's very user friendly once you get in there. And that's been really very helpful. Not to tell my mother she was right, but as you get older, these things get a little bit more difficult to learn. So I was glad that it wasn't, really difficult at all. But I want to thank both of you guys for being here with us, sharing this information, for continuing to partner with PWSA, for thinking outside of the box to move the PWS community forward. I encourage everybody who is attending or watching the recording later to check it out. And like Maria mentioned, just put in your journey if that's the only thing you do. So in addition to Maria and Chris being able to help, once you're there, Christy is very quickly becoming our PWSA expert in Discord. So you can reach out to her as well. She also gets picked on a little bit in there. So, come just to check that out if you'd like. But
Yeah.
Let's get more people in there and have some really great conversations.
Also, I just want to say, we covered a lot of things. If you still have questions, please reach out, connect with me or Chris or Christy or you, and we're happy to have a conversation offline. We really do want this to be a safe space for everyone. The purpose is to do research for good, and it's really important that everybody, believes in this, and part of that is if you have questions, we're happy to answer them.
Yeah, and it's not meant to be a trend space. It's like our space, I hope people also remember at the end of the day, right? Like as Maria shared, we're also parents, right? We have a daughter with PWS, and it's meant to be a space for our community. So I hope people don't think of it as like this is a trend geared, run space like that. So please, I hope you keep that in mind as we end this talk. So.
Lots of little comments just about this is all fantastic and thanking you. So the attendees are appreciating this as well. How can people reach you?
Our emails, mine's Maria at trend.community, Chris at trend.community. You can
reach me in Discord.
Yeah, go to.
All right, I like it. Maria at trend.community. Super easy to remember. All right. Well, thank you guys so much, and good night to everyone.
All right. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
All right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of PWS United. If you want to learn more about Prader-Willi syndrome and how PWSA USA is making strides in advocacy, family support, and research, visit www.pwsausa.org. And while you're there, we encourage you to sign up for our Pulse email newsletter to stay informed about the latest news, resources, and events. Don't forget to subscribe to the PWS United podcast so you never miss an episode. Our team is always available to support families and their loved ones living with PWS 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can call us at 941-312-0400 or email info@pwsausa.org. Catch a new episode next Tuesday, and until then, have a great week.